You ever wake up thinking the day ahead would be just like any other? That's exactly how it started for little Leah. Thompson, 11 years old, skinny as a rake with a head full of curls and a heart full of questions. But by the end of that day, folks in Dallas and maybe far beyond would never forget her name. Because in a moment of panic when titans of industry crumbled, it was the janitor's kid who stepped forward and changed everything. It was a Tuesday warm and quiet, the kind of morning where coffee smells drift through the air and the city moves with a calm rhythm. On the 32nd floor of a glass-paneled tower, Tech's CEO Marcus Vail straightened his collar in the mirror, ready to make the biggest pitch of his life. He had built this tech empire from the ground up, and today's $1.3 billion deal would be the crown jewel. Everything was just so. Executives reviewed slides, interns refreshed server logs, and the cleaning crew quietly made their way through the back halls. Among them was Diane Thompson, a woman who worked the night shift to keep the lights on for her little girl. And right beside her walked Leah, clutching a worn-out sketchbook filled with strange-looking diagrams and little scribbles only she understood. Diane always told her, "Stay quiet, stay out the way, and don't go touching nothing." And Leah always listened until that day. She sat cross-legged near the wiring closet, her favorite spot. Most kids had teddy bears or dolls. Leah had blinking servers, warm, humming machines, and her own world of wonder. Her mother called her brilliant, but most folks just smiled politely. She was the janitor's kid, after all. Nobody expected much. Upstairs, Marcus Vail took a long sip of his espresso, gazed across the skyline, and said to no one in particular, "Nothing can go wrong today." Famous last words. At exactly 8:37 a.m., the lights flickered. Once. Twice. Then the screens across the office started going black, every single one of them. Confusion turned to chaos. Main servers down, someone shouted. Firewalls acting like it's been hacked. Backups aren't responding. Phones lit up. Panic spread. The room, once full of quiet confidence, now buzzed with alarm. And in that corner of the building, in the shadows of grown-up problems, Leah looked up from her sketchpad. She noticed a blinking pattern on one of the network switches, 3 short, 2 long. Not random. Familiar. Like Morse code. Like it was trying to say something. "That's not just a crash," she whispered. "That's talking." She pulled out her sketchpad and flipped past her drawings of circuitry and pathways, landing on one shed labeled, months ago, "Exploit Sequence Looping Phantom." It was a theory, something Shed dreamed up after reading a manual left behind by an old technician. But what if it wasn't just theory? Back in the boardroom, Marcus' voice rose for the first time in years. He barked orders. The IT director looked pale. There were no answers, just red screens and lost time. The investors were waiting, and Tech was unraveling. Every second cost them thousands. Every delay meant a step closer to disaster. In the chaos, someone knocked over a tray of lattes. A consultant cursed loudly. A young coder banged on his keyboard like he could will the system back to life. And then, like a ripple through silence, came a small voice. "Excuse me. I think I can help." Heads turned. There, standing in the doorway in a hand-me-down hoodie and scuffed sneakers, was Leah. "Leah," her mother gasped. But Leah didn't back down. She stepped forward. Because sometimes in a room full of experts, it takes a child to notice the one thing everyone missed. And that morning, it may have started out like any other. But by lunchtime, the janitor's daughter would hold the key to everything. By the time the investors signed the final page of the deal that afternoon, Tech's name was safe, its reputation intact, perhaps even bolstered by what many would later call the miracle reboot. But what the media didn't see, what they couldn't possibly understand, was that the miracle had a name, Leah Thompson. And now people started noticing. After the meeting, Marcus Vale stepped out of the boardroom and found Leah sitting cross-legged by a vending machine, sipping a can of root beer like nothing had happened. He stood over her for a moment, unsure of what to say. "I've never seen anything like what you did," he finally admitted. Leah looked up, blinking. It wasn't that hard. It was just hidden. That night, Marcus called an emergency meeting, not about the crash, not about the investors, but about Leah. She knew our systems better than some of you. How the board members exchanged uneasy glances. Some praised her brilliance, others cautioned him. "She's just a child. We don't know where she learned this. This could be dangerous." The room split between awe and suspicion. For every executive who saw her as a prodigy, another saw a threat, an unpredictable anomaly who had exposed their vulnerabilities with crayons and curiosity. Meanwhile, back at home, Leah sat at the kitchen table while Diane warmed up leftover casserole. "You okay, baby?" Diane asked gently. "I think I scared them," Leah whispered. Diane smiled sadly. "Sometimes, baby, people don't know how to handle a bright light, especially when they expected darkness." Leah had always been a bit of a mystery. She never played with dolls or joined in hopscotch games. Instead, she watched birds for flight patterns, listened to machines for rhythm, and asked questions no adult could answer. The school counselor had once called her socially removed. The science teacher called her a walking calculator. Now the CEO of a billion-dollar tech company called her necessary. But Marcus wasn't finished. He invited Leah back the next day, not as a visitor, but as a guest of the company. She was given a visitor's badge, a tablet, and free rein to observe the control room for an hour. What she did instead was rewrite one of the subroutines in their outdated firewall, without being asked. Nathan, the IT director, reviewed the changes and turned white as a sheet. "Sir, this patch she made, it fixed a bug we've been chasing for 6 weeks. But again, not everyone cheered. Some whispered behind closed doors, 'She's too smart for her own good. What if she causes another crash? She doesn't even have credentials.' And then came the question no one wanted to say aloud, but everyone thought, 'If this kid knows our system this well, what else could she do with it?' Marcus, though impressed, now felt the pressure. His investors were asking questions. Human Resources was unsure how to classify a child prodigy. Legal warned of liability. PR warned of optics. The narrative was spiraling out of control, so he made a decision. A delicate one. He called Diane. "Your daughter is gifted." "No question," he began. "But there are procedures, protocols. We need time to understand how to support her appropriately." Diane knew what that meant. They were backing away. But before the call ended, Marcus added, "She's welcome here any time as long as she's accompanied. And I'll personally sponsor her scholarship. She deserves a place to grow." That night, Leah didn't say much. She just looked up at the stars and whispered, "They still don't see it." Diane wrapped an arm around her. "They will, baby. They just need time. Genius takes getting used to." The next day, Leah returned to school as if nothing had happened. No fanfare, no headlines. Just her notebook, and a quiet hum of code in her thoughts. But deep inside the servers at Virientech, something had changed. Logs showed her patch didn't just fix the bug. It optimized 3 core subsystems, enhanced throughput, and closed 2 backdoors the security team hadn't even known existed. Nathan approached Marcus quietly. "Sir, I know we agreed to slow things down, but this girl, she isn't just a one-time fluke. She's something else." Marcus stared at the terminal. "Then let's not lose sight of her." Because somewhere between the miracle and the aftermath, they'd all begun to realize Leah didn't just save the company. She rewrote its future. The wind carried a soft hum through the open kitchen window that Saturday morning as Diane stood at the sink scrubbing a coffee mug that once belonged to her late husband. The radio played a gospel hymn softly in the background, the kind Elijah Thompson used to whistle to when no one was listening. It had been years since that melody filled the house, but today it crept back in like a ghost of memory. At the kitchen table, Leah sat cross-legged, surrounded by tiny bolts wires and a small robot dog she was carefully rewiring. Her hands moved quickly, instinctively, while her eyes narrowed with laser focus. "I think it'll reprogram its guidance system," she murmured. Diane turned, wiping her hands with a dish towel. "Just don't turn it into another smoke machine. Last time it chased the mailman." Leah chuckled, but her focus didn't waver. There was something different about her now. Since that fateful visit to Virion Tech, something inside her had shifted, deepened. The world had seen a glimpse of her brilliance, but Leah had seen something more, a reflection. Something familiar. Something buried in the code itself. That evening, long after Leah had gone to bed, Diane sat on the floor of her bedroom next to the old cedar chest that held her most precious keepsakes. Inside, wrapped in a Marine Corps flag, was the weathered photo of Elijah smiling in uniform holding baby Leah in his arms. But it wasn't the photo she needed tonight. It was the journal. The leather-bound notebook was cracked with time, its pages softened by age and memory. Elijah's penmanship was still as sharp as his mind had been. Equations, encryption keys, system architecture. And on one page, a child's doodle of a robot. Below it, in a familiar slanted scrawl, "Leah will know what to do." Diane stared at the words, her breath catching. All these years, she'd thought the journal was too technical, too distant from the daughter Elijah never got to raise. But maybe it had always been for her. The next morning, she placed the journal gently in front of Leah as she ate her cereal. "What's this?" Leah asked, eyes wide. "Your dad's," Diane said, "and I think it's time you saw it." Leah opened it like she was unsealing a secret door. Her fingers paused over equations she recognized from memory, from instinct. Wait, this algorithm. This is part of Virion Tech's mainframe. But Dad wrote this before I was even born. That revelation sent chills down both their spines. Suddenly, Leah wasn't just a lucky kid who fixed a bug. She was the daughter of the man who helped shape the very bones of the system. She spent hours that day cross-referencing her father's notes with the systems she had seen at Virion Tech. She didn't even need a computer, her memory was enough. The deeper she went, the clearer it became. Elijah had predicted the weaknesses in the architecture, had warned about them in the margins. His ideas were decades ahead of their time. And now his daughter was the key to unlocking them. The next day, Leah and Diane returned to Virion Tech. This time not as outsiders, but as carriers of a legacy. Marcus Vale met them personally, ushering them into his office with a gravity that hadn't been there before. Leah laid the journal on the table and flipped to a specific page. "This section here, this is where the instability begins. My father wrote about it as a hypothetical risk, but it's real, and it's fixable." Marcus scanned the notes, his face pale. This changes everything." "It already has," Diane said quietly. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Marcus turned to Leah. "Where did you learn all this?" She looked him in the eye. "I didn't. I remembered it. My dad wrote it down so I wouldn't have to figure it all out alone." It was more than a clever answer. It was truth. Somehow, in that coded language of father and daughter, Leah had inherited a mission. That evening, back at home, Leah sat on the back porch, the leather journal beside her, the stars reflected in her eyes. "I thought I was just good at this," she whispered to the night. "But maybe I'm part of something bigger." Diane watched from the doorway, her heart full. "You are, baby. You always were." And from the shadows of a legacy once forgotten, a little girl and her father, separated by time but connected by brilliance, were beginning to rewrite the future. It was 2 days later when the phone rang. sharp, unexpected interruption in the quiet rhythm of the Thompson home. Diane was folding laundry, humming the same tune Elijah once whistled as he shaved in the mornings. The old landline phone on the wall, one of the last in the neighborhood, buzzed to life. She answered with a cautious, "Hello." "This is Evelyn Carter," came the voice, smooth and poised. "Director of Strategic Development at Varian Tech. We'd like to invite you and Leah back to our executive offices. There's an opportunity we'd like to discuss." Diane's hand tightened around the receiver. Her instincts told her this wasn't just a thank you visit. This was something bigger. They arrived the next morning to an entirely different reception. The lobby was bustling, but this time people turned and stared, not rudely but reverently. Engineers whispered behind their badges. Executives straightened their ties. A child genius had walked among them, and the stories were already spreading like wildfire. They were escorted past the familiar glass elevators to a high-level conference suite, one with a panoramic view of the city skyline. Inside were 4 sharply dressed individuals: Evelyn Carter, Marcus Vale, and 2 other board members. Bottles of imported water, notepads, and even a custom-printed welcome folder with Leah's name waited on the polished oak table. "Let's get straight to the point." Evelyn began, her smile practiced. "Leah, we've never encountered anyone like you. What you did during the crash, your insight, your calm, it's nothing short of remarkable." Leah shifted in her seat. She was wearing a denim jacket over a flower print shirt and had tied her curls in a ponytail. Just a kid. But they weren't looking at her like she was 8. They were looking at her like she was a gold mine. Evelyn continued, "We'd like to offer you a private mentorship. Access to our most advanced R&D environments. You'll work under direct supervision with our lead systems architects. We'll fund your education, your materials, and if you wish, assign you a personal development team. You could have a lab named after you by age 15. Leah blinked. "But I haven't even passed 5th grade." They laughed politely. But behind the laughter was anticipation, strategy, even hunger. "This isn't a job," Evelyn said. "It's a partnership. You have a gift, Leah. We believe you're meant to use it now, not 10 years from now." Diane, until then, silent, leaned forward. "And what about recess field trips, riding bikes with friends?" Marcus responded. "Of course we wouldn't take that away. But brilliance has its seasons. What Leah could accomplish now could revolutionize national security, AI, ethics, you name it." Back home, Diane sat with her head in her hands. "They want to fast-track your entire life, baby. You're still learning how to make scrambled eggs." Leah was sitting cross-legged in the middle of the living room, Elijah's journal open again. "Mom, I don't want to disappoint anyone. You won't. But you can't make choices based on what others expect. You have to ask, what do you want?" Leah looked at the photo of her father tucked in the front of the journal. "Would he want me to do this?" Diane smiled softly. "I think he'd want you to build rockets and mud pies. He'd want you to know your worth and your limits." The next day, after hours of soul-searching, they returned to Varian Tech. Evelyn greeted them with a smile that was just a little tighter than before. Leah stood straight. "I want to keep learning. I'd like to visit the lab. But I'm still a kid. I want to ride my scooter and get grass stains on my knees. I want to help the world, but I want to live in it first." There was silence, then a cough. Then Marcus surprisingly clapped once. "That's wisdom right there." Evelyn looked less pleased but said nothing. As they walked back to their car, Diane grinned. "You just turned down the moon, kiddo." Leah shrugged. "Maybe. But he'll visit it when I'm ready." It started with a single tweet. A junior developer at Varian Tech, who had witnessed Leah's decision firsthand, shared a short message. "Just watched an 8-year-old politely decline to become the youngest tech consultant in U.S. history. Said she wanted to ride her bike first. World, take notes. Within hours, the tweet had gone viral. Overnight, Leah Thompson became a name whispered not just in tech corridors, but in newsrooms, classrooms, even the halls of Congress. Hashtags exploded, hashtag little genius, hash let kids. Be kids, Leah Thompson. Her story sparked debates on morning shows, op-eds in major newspapers, and phone calls from producers. But nothing prepared Diane for the call from PBS's American Spirit, a Legacy program, known for telling heartwarming, deeply human stories. They didn't want to turn Leah into a spectacle. They wanted to hear her heart. 2 weeks later, the crew arrived. No flashy equipment, just soft lights, microphones, and a calm, warm host named Walter Duvall, a former teacher with a grandfather's voice and a quiet smile. They set up in the Thompson living room. Leah wore her favorite hoodie navy blue with a faded planet Saturn on the chest. She curled up in the corner of the couch, Elijah's journal still never far from reach. Walter leaned in gently. "Leah, can you tell us what happened at Virion Tech?" Leah fidgeted, then nodded. "Their computers broke and I noticed things. I asked if I could help. Then they said I was special. But I don't feel special. I just see how things connect." Walter smiled. "And when they offered you that big opportunity, why did you say no?" Leah shrugged. "Because I'm not done being a kid. I want to finish my science fair project. I like reading books under trees, and I want to make mistakes, not big ones, but kid ones." Diane watched from the kitchen, a tissue balled in her hand. She wasn't crying from pride, but from recognition her daughter was growing up, but not too fast. Walter leaned in again. "Your father was a systems analyst, right? And he wrote in a journal." Leah lit up. "Yes, he wrote puzzles, diagrams, stories. He said code is like poetry with power." The segment aired 5 nights later. It was supposed to be a quiet piece tucked between a story about a Midwest farming initiative and a profile on a retiring park ranger. But something about Leah's honesty, her innocence, and her unshakable calm in the face of global attention captured the nation's soul. Letters started pouring in. Hundreds, then thousands. From retired engineers, inspired teachers, young girls who wanted to be just like Leah. Even a handwritten note from a 92-year-old former NASA scientist. "In all my years, I've never seen wisdom wrapped in such small shoulders." Talk shows called. Podcasts offered interviews. University presidents extended honorary campus visits. Virion Tech reissued their public statement calling Leah a reminder that brilliance like childhood should be nurtured, not exploited. Even the White House reached out. An invitation to a National STEM Youth Roundtable signed personally by the president's science advisor. But through it all, Diane held the line. Leah will speak when she wants and only where she feels respected. One afternoon, while sitting on the porch with a peanut butter sandwich and her journal, Leah whispered, "Mom, it's not about me anymore, is it?" Diane looked at her. "It started with you, but now it's about something bigger, about what happens when a child is seen and heard." That night, as the stars blinked above their modest Texas home, Leah wrote a new entry in Elijah's journal. "I said no to something huge today, and people are listening. Maybe being a kid with a voice is more powerful than being a kid with a title." The world had taken notice, but Leah had remained exactly who she was, a little girl with big thoughts, bare feet in the grass, and a gift she refused to rush. The invitation came on a quiet Thursday afternoon, embossed formal and sealed with the presidential crest. Leah had been selected as the keynote youth speaker at the National STEM Inspiration Summit held in Washington, D.C. It was the kind of event where Nobel laureates shook hands with middle schoolers and where big ideas were born over simple words. Leah sat at the kitchen table, her feet swinging beneath her chair. "Do I have to give a speech?" "Mom," Diane smiled, smoothing her daughter's curls. "Only if you want to." After a long pause, Leah nodded. "Okay, but I want to say something real. Not big words. Just real ones." 2 weeks later, Diane and Leah boarded a flight to Washington. For the first time since the Viriantech incident, Leah was quiet, not anxious, just thoughtful. She held Elijah's journal close to her chest like a compass. As the plane took off, Diane looked out the window and whispered, "You're going to land with purpose, baby girl." The summit was held at the historic Kennedy Center. Grand chandeliers, velvet seats, the soft hum of prelude music. Scientists, students, educators, and policymakers filled the hall. Leah, wearing a navy dress and sneakers, was led backstage. As her name was announced, a soft applause rolled through the auditorium. She walked slowly onto the stage. No teleprompter, just a small piece of notepaper folded in her palm. The lights felt warm on her face. Her voice, when it came, was soft, but it carried. "Hi. My name's Leah. I'm 8 years old. I like peanut butter puzzles and sitting under trees with books. A few weeks ago, I was just a kid in a computer lab. Then something big broke, and I helped fix it." A soft laugh rippled through the crowd. "I didn't do it because I wanted attention. I did it because I saw a problem, and my brain wanted to help. I think that's what science is, seeing things and caring enough to make them better." She looked down at her notepaper, then out at the audience again. "People called me a genius, but I think a genius is just someone who doesn't stop noticing. I learned that from my dad. He used to say, 'Your gift isn't what you know, it's how you see.'" Diane, seated in the third row, dabbed her eyes. "I still want to be a kid. I want to chase fireflies and ride my bike. But I also want to make things better. And I think we all can, even if we don't wear suits or have big jobs." She stepped back from the mic. The auditorium was silent for half a breath, then erupted. A full standing ovation. Leah looked confused for a moment, then beamed. She gave a small wave and ran off stage straight into Diane's arms. Backstage, a line of scientists and educators formed not to speak to a prodigy, but to meet a girl who reminded them why they started in the first place. One older man, hair white as frost, shook her hand. "Young Lady, I've spent my life solving codes. But you reminded me that hearts are the most important ones to understand." In the days that followed, Leah's speech was broadcast across networks. School children reenacted it for class. Educators played it during staff meetings. She was invited to contribute to a children's science curriculum, not as a mascot, but as a voice. And through it all, Leah stayed the same. Curious, grounded, joyful. She still rode her bike around the cul-de-sac, still built pillow forts, still read Elijah's journal under the old oak tree out back. But something had shifted. Not in how she saw the world, but in how the world saw kids like her, thoughtful, gifted, but still needing time to grow. Diane watched her daughter draw constellations in sidewalk chalk one evening and thought she's changing things without even trying. Sometimes changing the world doesn't look like a revolution. Sometimes it looks like an 8-year-old girl with untied shoes and a paper folded in her hand. It started with one spark, not in a boardroom, not in a think tank, but from the curious mind of a little girl with big eyes and a bigger heart. In the aftermath of Leah's legendary intervention at Viriantech, the headlines were only the beginning. Her name became more than a trending topic. It became a movement. Across the nation, schools took note. But not just the elite institutions. The underfunded public schools in rural counties, the charter schools in tough neighborhoods, the homeschool networks in Midwest barns. They all began rethinking how they viewed intelligence. Not as a test score, but as a spark of potential waiting to be noticed. Leah's core idea that children from all walks of life had untapped genius became the cornerstone of a new initiative funded by the Department of Education. The Unlocking Genius Act poured millions of dollars into pilot programs aimed at identifying hidden talents among underrepresented students. The act passed with overwhelming bipartisan support, and the White House invited Leah and her mother to a special signing ceremony. At the ceremony, the president turned to Leah and said, "You reminded this country what innovation really looks like. And it's not wearing a suit, it's wearing sneakers and a shy smile. But for all the accolades, Leah never forgot the room where it all began, that fluorescent-lit hallway, the security pass swinging from her neck, the terrified glance from a CEO and the humming servers awaiting a miracle. That room was immortalized in a digital painting now hanging at the National Museum of American History. It's titled Reset. The painting shows Leah from behind typing while light pours out from the screen, a symbol of something greater than code. A symbol of what happens when people are willing to believe in the least likely among them. Meanwhile, at Tech, changes went beyond symbolic. They launched a company-wide restructuring. For the first time, employee idea pipelines were opened not just to developers and engineers, but to everyone from mailroom clerks to cafeteria cooks. And who better to lead the first open table design session than Leah herself? She stood before a packed crowd, adults who had spent years in the industry now silent, hanging on the words of a child. And she said, "Everyone deserves a chance to be heard. The problem isn't that we don't have ideas, it's that we've stopped listening." Her words echoed far beyond that room. TEDx events invited her. Harvard professors quoted her. Tech blogs called her the anti-Silicon Valley Messiah. But to Leah, she was just a girl who once spilled juice on her mom's keyboard and got grounded. One of the most powerful moments came months later at a school in Tulsa. Leah was invited to a robotics fair. There she met a young boy named Jamal, who had built a miniature data center model out of Legos. When she asked him what it did, he said, "It doesn't do anything yet. I'm waiting for someone to believe in it." Leah smiled, knelt beside him, and whispered, "I believe in it. I believe in you." That moment was caught on video and shared millions of times. People said they cried, not because it was dramatic, but because it was rare to see genuine encouragement delivered without performance. Sometimes history doesn't announce itself with parades or headlines. Sometimes it walks quietly into a failing server room wearing pink sneakers and holding a tablet covered in stickers. Leah didn't set out to change the system. She didn't walk into Tech that day seeking justice, fame, or even acknowledgement. All she wanted was to understand, to help. But in doing so, she revealed a truth many of us ignore. The system isn't broken because of code. It's broken because of the people we overlook. Too often we assume brilliance comes packaged in certain ways: age, race, status, degrees. We look to titles and tenures, resumes, and recommendations. And in doing so, we miss the quiet girl in the corner who sees the pattern no one else noticed. We dismiss the janitor who remembers how every wire was originally installed. We laugh off the child's insight as cute rather than consider that it might be correct. Leah's moment wasn't just a tech win. It was a cultural wake-up call. She reminded us that true intelligence isn't about how much you know, but how clearly you can see and how courageously you act on that clarity, even when no one is listening. But Leah didn't come from nowhere. Her father, a man who fixed things in the dark while others walked brightly lit halls, planted that seed. Her mother, strong and perceptive, watered it with discipline, grace, and grit. And her community, from that aging math teacher down the street to the retired engineer at church, all added their own rain. So what is legacy really? Legacy isn't about what you leave behind. It's about what you set in motion. Leah didn't just reset a system. She reset expectations. She opened the door not only for herself, but for thousands of other Leahs whose minds work differently, whose brilliance is subtle, unassuming, and uninvited. Because of her, Tech rewrote their hiring process. Because of her, schools across the country introduced new mentorship programs for underrepresented youth in STEM. Because of her, 1,000 parents started seeing their kids' questions not as distractions, but as the beginnings of something profound. And because of her, maybe someone watching this video today will see their own story in a new light. If you've ever felt ignored, too old, too young, too poor, too soft-spoken, Leah's story is proof. Your voice still matters. Your insight still counts. And if you're someone with influence, a teacher, a grandparent, a pastor, a neighbor, you may never know whose fire you're fanning with just a word of belief. So the next time someone walks in with an idea that feels too small or too strange, take a breath. Pause. Listen. Because sometimes the system doesn't need a reboot. It needs a 10-year-old girl to remind us what we forgot, that solutions don't come from the top. They rise up from the cracks. And when we choose to notice, nurture, and uplift those voices from the margins, that's when we truly begin to change the world. After hearing Leah's story, we want to hear from you. Have you ever seen a spark of brilliance in someone that others ignored? A child, a coworker, maybe even yourself. What did that moment teach you? Did you speak up? Encourage them? Take a chance? Or did the moment pass you by in a world that often dismisses the quiet, the young, the underrepresented? How do you make space for those voices in your own life? Tell us your story in the comments. Your experience might be the encouragement someone else needs right now. And if Leah reminded you of someone in your life, don't forget to tag them. Share this video and keep the legacy moving forward.